All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining me for this week's Mindful Moments session. My name is Jean, and it's an honor to be able to host these mindfulness sessions for you all. This week, we will be talking about how to create a morning routine and specifically implementing mindfulness practices in our morning routine. So we can think of our morning routine as something to help tune our mind and body for the day, just as a musician tunes their instrument before a performance. So we'll be going through some general guidelines for how to that teaches us how to better implement our morning routine and how to that helps us to include mindfulness practices. So one of the first things that we want to do, especially since if we haven't been implementing mindfulness practices and we want to try something new and make a change to our existing morning routines, we want to put the cues in place. So we want to hook our morning routine um, of mindfulness practices to a specific action that we already do, such as getting out of bed or brushing your teeth. So, for example, we can say, after I brush my teeth, I will sit down and breathe mindfully for 10 minutes. Um, so, attaching that mindfulness practice to a cue in your morning routine, such as finishing brushing your teeth. And this will help cue the brain that it is time for mindfulness so that we can start to um, build that habit of implementing the mindfulness practice at a specific time in our morning routine. So, another thing that we want to do is to eliminate technology. And especially with this new age of technology, and some of us use smartphones for our alarms, it is very tempting to reach for our devices when we have maybe just gotten out of bed. But the good thing here is to try not to reach for your device until you have finished your mind and body routine. And this is because we want to make sure that our mind is pretty free from all the tasks and emotions and just things we have to do throughout the day so that we aren't thinking about how to plan our day when we are doing our mindfulness practice and we're entirely focused on the present moment and being reflectful. So after we get our morning power hour in, it will be okay to reach for those devices and start planning our day. So another thing to keep in mind when we're starting out with mindfulness in our morning routine is to start small. And when people typically make new goals or having trying to implement something new, such as New Year's resolutions, we often tend to overestimate the amount of time we have, and we tend to be idealistic in what we plan. So, starting small, doing mindfulness practices like 5 minutes of breathing, one sentence in a journal, a few minutes in nature, or just even one intention. These tiny changes can breed success because as long as we do them consistently, um, these mindfulness practices will become ingrained in our morning routine. And practicing them consistently will help us to kind of connect more spiritually, and with mindfulness. Another tip is to track our progress when we're trying to start something new. Tracking our progress, maybe like a habit tracker, tracking our streaks of success and honoring our commitments to these 5 minutes of mindfulness or however much you plan, is going to help us encourage and motivate us to continue um, these mindfulness practices, continue developing the good habit of implementing mindfulness in the morning. All right, so now before we do our mindfulness practice, and for this week, what I would like us to do is to envision how we would implement our mindfulness practice in the mornings if you don't already implement mindfulness practices. Think about what mindfulness practice is best for you to do in the morning and how long would you be doing it, and maybe what cue would you take, such as brushing your teeth or getting out of bed, to what cue would you take so that after you finished a certain thing in your morning routine, you would come to mindfulness. So thinking about what we were just talking about earlier, about the guidelines. But before we do our mindfulness practice, I would like us all to take 3 deep breaths. So breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. All right, enjoy. All right, so now that we have finished our mindful practice, we will transition to our discussion section. So, thinking about the questions, why is it important to have a morning routine, and why is it important to implement mindfulness in our morning routine? Also, how can we implement mindfulness into our morning routines? All right, so why is it important to have a morning routine? Having a morning routine, especially with mindfulness, helps us to kind of settle our nerves, reflect, and prepare ourselves for the day ahead of us. And so, having that quiet time or that power hour, instead of maybe immediately turning to the tasks that we have to do for the day and perhaps getting anxious, instead, we back away and we practice mindfulness. It helps us to better prepare us for our day and also um, be have face our day with a more calm mindset as we have already gotten our power hour in. And so, how can we implement mindfulness into our morning routines? Well, there are many different ways we can implement mindfulness. Um, some of the most common, I would say, would probably be breathing practices. We can have a certain amount, a designated time where we practice breathing, we practice meditation, or perhaps yoga and different forms of kind of exercise is also a moving meditation. So that could be your way to implement mindfulness into your morning routine. Implementing mindfulness doesn't necessarily mean that we have to sit down and close our eyes and meditate. Mindfulness is just setting a designated amount of time to dedicate ourselves to the present and paying attention to nothing but the present. For me, one of my most ideal ways to implement mindfulness in my morning routine is taking a walk in my neighborhood, especially if it's earlier in the morning and it would be more peaceful and also um, just it's there's a kind of blissful feeling when there's not a lot of people outside and we are or I am taking that time to dedicate myself to mindfulness and trying to be in the present. And so those are my thoughts relating to morning routines and implementing mindfulness in our morning routines. And so now we will end our session with a quote relating to what the topic that we were talking about, which is today we were talking about creating a morning routine and implementing mindfulness in our morning routine. So, your day is pretty much formed by how you spend your first hour. Check your thoughts, attitude, and heart. All right. Thank you all so much for coming to this week's Mindful Moment session. I just want to quickly reference the National Geographic Everyday Mindfulness Special Issue, which some of the content in this presentation or this session was inspired by this issue. And thank you all so much for coming. feel free to stay back and maybe give me any feedback or ask any questions. I would be more than happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, feel free to kind of resume your day. And I hope you all have a wonderful and mindful week ahead. Thank you again for coming to this week's Mindful Moments session and taking some time to dedicate yourself to learning about mindfulness.